Earth had always been a quiet, forgotten corner of the universe. Far from the reach of galactic powers, Earth had lived in peaceful isolation, unaware of the vast empire that stretched across the stars. But that peaceful ignorance was shattered the moment the galactic empire took notice. The message was broadcasted to every city on Earth, a cold, indifferent voice echoing through every screen. It was direct, it was simple, it was final. The human species is hereby annexed by the Galactic Empire. Earth's resources will now serve the Empire. All humans are considered slaves, and any resistance will be crushed. At first, the world didn't know how to react. They thought it was a joke, some kind of sick hoax. But when the sky darkened with the shadow of enormous ships, the size of cities, the truth became clear. The ships descended, silent and unyielding, and Earth was no longer just a small, inconsequential planet in a quiet corner of space. The Galactic Empire had come, and they had come for Earth. The invasion was swift. Within days, entire cities fell. Earth's military forces, though brave and determined, were no match for the Empire's vast, superior technology. Alien forces, stronger and more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen, tore through the defenses with ease. There was no chance to fight back, no chance to win. Earth was nothing more than a prize to be taken. Captain Alexander, Alex Carter had never imagined he would witness the end of his world. He was just a soldier, stationed at a small outpost in the middle of nowhere, doing his duty. But when the first blast from an Empire warship shook his base to the core, he knew that everything was about to change. He stood at the window, staring out at the sky, watching as dozens of massive ships filled the atmosphere. The world felt too small, too fragile, like the very air was closing in on him. He could feel the weight of what was happening. His mind raced. His first instinct was to run, to find safety, to protect his family and friends. But deep down, he knew running was no longer an option. As the Empire's forces landed, soldiers in heavy armor disembarked. They moved with a precision and confidence that made Alex's heart sink. These weren't just invaders. They were conquerors, masters of a galaxy that now, in the blink of an eye, had claimed Earth as its own. Alex's mind went blank, but his body didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rifle and ran toward the command center. It was time to make a decision that would change everything. The command center was chaos. Officers shouted orders, soldiers scrambled to gather supplies, and technicians worked frantically at their stations, trying to make sense of the overwhelming attack. "Captain," someone shouted as Alex entered. "They've cut off all communications. We can't contact anyone. They've already taken the northern region and they're moving fast." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't heard anything about the northern region being attacked. The Empire was moving too quickly. But as much as he wanted to panic, he didn't. He couldn't. The world needed a leader, and even if he wasn't the one for the job, he would step up. It wasn't about being ready. It was about doing what had to be done. "Get everyone in the evacuation pods," Alex barked, his voice steady despite the terror that gnawed at his insides. "We'll regroup at the secondary base. I'll hold the line here for as long as I can." The officers nodded, some reluctantly. They all knew the odds. Earth was losing and fast. But Alex had always been the kind of person who refused to back down from a fight, no matter how hopeless it seemed. As the minutes ticked by, the air in the command center grew thick with tension. The Empire's forces were getting closer. The sound of footsteps outside echoed through the building, the unmistakable rhythm of soldiers who had come to claim their prize. Alex wasn't naive. He knew that standing and fighting was a fool's choice, but that didn't stop him from trying. He had seen the fear in his comrades' eyes and it fueled him. They weren't ready to give up, not yet, and neither was he. He gathered what little supplies he could, a few grenades, extra ammo, and a ration pack. He checked his rifle, ensuring it was in working order. Then, with a final look at the command center, he bolted for the exit. He couldn't save the entire planet, but he could fight. He could make sure the world wasn't conquered without a struggle. Outside, the world was chaos. The streets were filled with the sound of distant explosions, the screams of people caught in the violence. Buildings were crumbling, fires were spreading, and the air smelled of smoke and fear. The once proud cities of Earth were being reduced to rubble. Alex didn't stop. He kept moving, running as fast as his legs could carry him toward the nearest resistance point. Along the way, he saw others, civilians, soldiers, all of them looking at him with a mixture of hope and despair. They knew the truth. They were losing. But there was something in the way Alex moved, in the way he didn't stop running, that made them believe. They might not win this war, but they would make the Empire regret ever thinking they could control Earth. The Empire's ships loomed overhead, blocking out the sky like a dark, unfeeling storm. But for the first time, Alex didn't feel the crushing weight of defeat. He felt something else, something fiercer, something that burned within him, something that had always been there, buried beneath the surface. He was human, and humanity had never been known for giving up. He reached the resistance point and gathered a group of survivors. They didn't have much. No fancy technology, no powerful weapons, just raw will and determination. And that, Alex knew, was enough. He stood at the front, facing the group of people who were willing to fight for Earth. "They think we're weak," he said, his voice rising with confidence. "They think they can just come here and take what they want, but they've never met us. They've never seen what we're capable of, and they never will." And with that, Alex Carter, a soldier, a son of Earth, made the impossible choice to stand, to fight, and to show the galaxy exactly who humanity was. The night was dark, filled with the distant rumble of explosions and the unmistakable sounds of chaos. The streets of New York were littered with debris, the buildings reduced to skeletons of their former selves. Smoke curled into the sky, mixing with the light of the alien ships hovering above, casting eerie shadows over the city. Alex Carter moved quickly through the wreckage, his boots crunching on shattered glass and twisted metal. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from something deeper, something that made him move faster. Something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. The world around him was collapsing, and yet Alex felt a fire ignite within him that he hadn't known was there. He had never been a leader, not in the traditional sense. He had always followed orders, carried out missions, and done his duty. But now, there were no orders to follow. The world was on the brink of extinction, and Alex had only one choice: to fight back. Alex reached a hidden alley where a group of soldiers had gathered, all looking like they were trying to figure out how to fight back against an empire that had already wiped out entire nations. They were disorganized, their uniforms ragged and torn, and their faces were drawn with exhaustion and fear. But there was a spark in their eyes, the same spark Alex felt in himself. One of the soldiers, a young man no older than 20, saw Alex and stepped forward, holding up his rifle in a shaky salute. "Captain Carter," he said, his voice unsteady. "We didn't think anyone was left." Alex nodded, though his chest tightened with emotion. "I'm not here to be a symbol," he said. "I'm here to get us to the next fight." A woman older than the rest stepped forward. She had graying hair and a look of determination etched into every line on her face. "You're right. We've been scattered, hiding from the enemy, but we can't just keep running. We need a plan." Alex took a deep breath. The weight of what he had to do was starting to settle in. He had no training in tactics, no experience leading a resistance force against an empire that controlled the stars. But what he had, what they all had, was something the empire didn't: determination, humanity's will to survive. "We have to hit them where it hurts," Alex said, his voice steady now, his mind already working. "Their technology, their communications, their supply lines, if we can disrupt their resources, they'll be forced to retreat. They won't be able to keep up the invasion." The group fell silent, the weight of the plan sinking in. It wasn't perfect, but it was all they had. Finally, the older woman spoke again. "I'm with you, Captain," she said, her voice strong. "We fight back or we die trying." The others nodded, their expressions hardened by the reality of their situation. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a chance at victory. They were fighting for Earth. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. The resistance group grew as more survivors joined the cause. Alex and his team attacked small outposts, sabotaged communication hubs, and gathered intelligence. Every victory was hard-won and every setback felt like a crushing blow. But through it all, something changed. The people who had once felt hopeless began to believe. They started to see that maybe, just maybe, they could fight back. One night, as Alex stood atop a broken building, watching the glow of the Empire's ships hovering overhead, he felt something stir inside him. It wasn't fear. It was something else. Resolve. The Tyrak ships, massive and impenetrable, were parked in orbit, their weapons ready. They had a fleet strong enough to erase Earth from existence, but they hadn't yet. And as long as the human race still had breath, they would keep fighting. Alex looked around at his team, the men and women who had joined him in this fight. They weren't soldiers, they were survivors. Some had been doctors, teachers, farmers, ordinary people who had been thrown into a war they didn't ask for. And yet, here they were, standing at the precipice, ready to take on an empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries. "We're not going to win this battle by being like them," Alex said to the group, his voice strong but tinged with the exhaustion of days without rest. "We can't match their strength. We have to fight smart. We have to use what we know. Humanity's strength is in its adaptability. That's how we win." The young soldier from earlier, the one who had greeted Alex, spoke up. "How do we take the fight to them? We don't even have the weapons." Alex met his eyes, his gaze steady. "We'll take what we can. We'll steal from them, we'll improvise, and we'll fight with everything we have. It's not about weapons or numbers. It's about our will to keep going no matter what. We show them that Earth will never surrender." The others nodded, the weight of the words settling in. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for their home, for their families, for their future. The first major operation was a success. Alex and his team infiltrated an Empire base, using guerrilla tactics and the element of surprise. They disabled the Empire's communication network, cutting off their ability to coordinate with their fleet. It wasn't a decisive blow, but it sent a message. Earth wasn't going down without a fight. The Empire retaliated, of course. Their response was swift and brutal. But Alex's resistance had already learned to move faster, to strike harder. They knew they couldn't win every battle, but they could make the Empire pay for every inch they took. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance grew stronger. Alex's name became a symbol of hope, a beacon for those still willing to fight. And in the darkest hours of the night, when the weight of the war seemed unbearable, the people of Earth didn't just see a soldier leading them. They saw someone who believed, truly believed, that no force in the universe could ever erase the human spirit. The war had just begun, but Alex knew one thing: humanity would not be enslaved. Not today. Not ever. The night sky over Earth had never looked so dark. The stars that had once twinkled above the cities, marking the vastness of the universe, were now drowned out by the monstrous shadow of the Empire's warships. Their presence was a constant reminder that humanity's fight for survival was far from over. But Alex Carter and the Resistance knew something the Empire hadn't counted on. Humanity had a resilience that couldn't be crushed, not even by the mightiest force in the galaxy. For weeks, they had been fighting back in the shadows, striking wherever they could, chipping away at the Empire's hold. Every small victory felt like a spark in the darkness, lighting up the hearts of the survivors. But they all knew that their time was running out. The Empire was regrouping, preparing for a final assault that would wipe them off the map for good. Alex stood in the heart of what remained of New York City, his eyes scanning the horizon. The city had been all but destroyed in the initial invasion. Tall buildings were now rubble, streets were scarred with the marks of alien fire, and the air was thick with the stench of burning debris. But even here in the ruins, Alex could see the signs of humanity's strength. Resistance fighters, civilians, and soldiers alike worked together, pulling down metal beams, lifting debris, and fortifying whatever was left of the city. They were building something, not just a defense, but a message. They weren't just surviving. They were preparing to fight back with everything they had. Alex's heart was heavy with the weight of what was to come. The final battle wasn't far off. The Empire had amassed its forces. They would launch their full-scale attack soon. The question was, could they hold out long enough to give the world a chance? His mind was filled with thoughts of his family, of all the lives lost, of everything the Empire had taken. But above all, it was the faces of those who had joined him in this fight that burned in his mind. The young soldiers who had never seen war before, the civilians who picked up weapons and joined the cause, the men and women who were willing to lay down their lives for Earth's future. He couldn't let them down, he wouldn't. The Resistance had spent the last few days preparing a daring attack. They knew that to defeat the Empire, they had to hit them where it hurt the most, their command center, the heart of their operation. It was located in the ruins of a former Empire base just outside the remains of a city that had once been one of Earth's greatest capitals. If they could infiltrate that base, sabotage their communications, and cripple their command network, it would be a blow the Empire couldn't recover from. But the Empire wasn't blind. They knew humanity would try something. They had fortified the base with heavy defenses, drones, and thousands of soldiers. For the first time since the war had begun, Alex felt fear crawling under his skin. He was no longer just a soldier. He was leading this mission. The weight of responsibility rested squarely on his shoulders. The fear that crept up his spine was a reminder of what was at stake, but it was also a reminder of why he had to keep going. Earth had no other choice. Alex and the Resistance team had moved under cover of darkness. They traveled by foot, avoiding the Empire's patrols, staying low to the ground. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of their footsteps on the rubble beneath them. The team was small, only 20 of them, each one carrying the weight of their past on their shoulders. They didn't have the luxury of hope. What they had was determination, and that would have to be enough. They reached the outskirts of the Empire base. The perimeter was heavily guarded, with watchtowers, drones, and turrets scanning the area. But Alex had a plan. They would infiltrate the base through the underground tunnels. The old subway system, once part of New York's sprawling infrastructure, now served as a perfect route for the Resistance. Once inside, they would split into smaller teams. One would disable the power supply. Another would destroy the communications center, and Alex's team would make their way to the control room. It was a simple plan, but it required perfect timing and precision. As they made their way through the tunnels, Alex's heart pounded in his chest. The closer they got, the more the reality of what they were about to do hit him. He was leading them into the very heart of the Empire's control. If they failed, it would be the end of everything. But there was no turning back. When they reached the Empire base's core, the battle began. The Resistance fought like animals cornered, every shot fired with purpose, every move calculated. The Empire's forces were powerful, their weapons more advanced than anything Alex had ever seen, but the human spirit was stronger than any weapon. With every blast of energy that lit up the darkness, every soldier that fell, they fought harder. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something more. Alex's team reached the control room, their hearts racing as the sound of blaster fire echoed outside. The enemy was closing in, but they had one shot. "Now," Alex shouted, as he and his team stormed the control room. The Empire soldiers inside barely had time to react before they were overwhelmed. Alex pressed the button to disable the command center's power grid, his hands shaking with adrenaline. The lights flickered and went out, leaving the room bathed in an eerie silence. "Mission accomplished," Alex said, breathing heavily. He turned to face his team, pride swelling in his chest. But there was no time for celebration. The Empire would come for them. The next wave was already on its way. The ground shook as the Empire's reinforcements arrived, but Alex wasn't afraid, not anymore. He could feel it in the air. The resistance had struck a blow. It wasn't enough to win, but it was enough to send a message. Humanity wasn't going to die quietly. They had shown the Empire what it meant to push too far. As the battle raged on, Alex felt the weight of it all lift, just for a moment. For the first time, the Empire was on the defensive. The fight was no longer just about survival, it was about taking back control. And in that moment, Alex knew that Earth would never be the same. This was only the beginning. The wrath of Earth had been unleashed, and the galaxy would never forget what humans were capable of. The Empire had not been prepared for the human spirit, for the defiance that burned in the hearts of the survivors. After the Resistance's successful strike against their command center, Earth had become something more than just a target. It had become a symbol of rebellion, of humanity's refusal to bow to the weight of a superior force. But the victory, though hard won, came with a cost. The Empire's retaliation was swift and brutal. Ships filled the skies, their engines roaring as they descended toward Earth, casting dark shadows over the broken landscape. Their weapons glowed with the power to level entire cities, and they were prepared to erase the Resistance in one final, overwhelming strike. Alex Carter stood at the front of the Resistance's command center, his heart heavy with the weight of their next move. The adrenaline from their previous success had worn off, replaced by the grim reality of what they were facing. The Empire was coming, and this time they wouldn't be holding back. "Captain," said Lieutenant Harper, a young officer who had been with Alex since the beginning, "they've launched a full-scale attack. We have one chance to stop them." Alex didn't need to ask how the battle was going. He could hear the distant rumble of explosions and see the bright flashes of blaster fire outside. The Empire had unleashed their fury, and it was a storm they weren't sure they could weather. He turned to the rest of his team, all of them standing in the dimly lit room. Their faces were lined with exhaustion, their eyes bloodshot from days without sleep. But in their eyes, Alex could still see that spark of determination, the same spark he had seen when he first stood among them, ready to fight back. "Listen up," Alex said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "The Empire thinks they can crush us in one final blow. They're wrong. We've already proven we're stronger than they thought. We've shown them we won't just lie down and die. But we can't win this battle alone. We need to strike back now or they'll destroy everything." He paused, his eyes scanning the room, meeting each one of theirs. "This is it. We either take them down or Earth falls, but we fight. We fight for every life that's been lost. We fight for every person who's joined us, and we fight for our home." There was silence in the room, but it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of resolve. The soldiers who had been just surviving were now ready to take action. Alex could see it in their faces. They weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting because they had no other choice. This was the moment that would define them. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Alex and his team had planned their assault carefully. Their target was the heart of the Empire's invasion force, a massive warship floating in Earth's orbit. If they could disable its weapons systems, they could turn the tide of the battle. They moved fast, slipping through the chaos that had already consumed the city. The streets were thick with smoke, and the air was filled with the sounds of distant explosions. The Empire had begun its attack, but the Resistance was ready to strike back. Alex's team moved with purpose, cutting through enemy lines with brutal efficiency. The Empire's soldiers, though formidable, were not prepared for the guerrilla tactics the Resistance had mastered. They were used to fighting armies, not desperate, scattered groups of survivors who knew the land better than anyone, and that gave Alex's team the edge. "We're almost there," Alex said, his voice low, as they neared the base of the Empire's warship. The ship loomed above them, dark and foreboding. The blast shields were down, exposing the vulnerable heart of the massive vessel. Alex and his team fought their way through the outer defenses, using explosives to create a breach in the hull. It was a risky move, but they didn't have time for hesitation. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. They made their way inside, and Alex's heart raced. The corridors of the ship were silent, but the tension was unbearable. They had one shot. If they failed, everything was over. "Ready?" Alex asked, looking at his team. Everyone nodded, their faces set in grim determination. They were all ready for this moment. No matter what came next, they wouldn't stop. The fight inside the warship was chaos. The Empire's forces had set up defensive measures, but the resistance fought through them like a wave crashing against a rock. There was no turning back now. Alex led the charge, pushing forward with every ounce of strength he had left. His body ached from days of fighting, but the adrenaline kept him moving. He could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. But in that moment, all that mattered was taking down the Empire. They reached the central control room, and Alex slammed into the door with all his force. The blast doors cracked open, and the resistance poured in, taking out the remaining guards in a blur of motion. "Set the charges," Alex shouted as he moved to the control panel. He could see the countdown ticking down on the screen. The Empire's weapons were preparing to fire. They had seconds. One of the soldiers placed the explosives on the core of the weapon system, and Alex ran to the control panel. He slammed his hand down on the final switch. The countdown stopped. The weapon system was disabled. But the ship wasn't out of danger yet. The Empire was not one to give up without a fight. Alex's team had to get out. The Empire would not go down quietly. As the explosives detonated, the warship shook violently. The alarms blared, signaling the ship's imminent destruction. The ship systems began to overload, and fire erupted in the walls. The resistance had done it. The heart of the Empire's assault had been crushed. But they weren't safe yet. Alex led his team out of the control room, weaving through the chaotic corridors as the ship began to break apart. The explosion they had triggered would cripple the Empire's ability to continue the attack, but they had no time to celebrate. They had to escape. The ship lurched as another explosion rocked the core. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed his team forward, urging them to run faster. The Empire had underestimated them once again, but that didn't mean they were safe. They made it to the escape pods just as the ship began to tear itself apart. Alex watched as the escape pods launched one by one, carrying the survivors away from the wreckage. Earth had won, but there was no time to savor the victory. The battle was far from over. The Empire would regroup. The war would continue. But humanity had sent a message. And that message was clear. Earth would not be enslaved. The war had taken its toll. Earth was scarred, its cities reduced to rubble, its people pushed to the brink of exhaustion. Yet in the face of annihilation, humanity had not been broken. They had fought, clawed, and bled for their survival. And now, standing at the precipice of the final battle, they knew the truth. This was their last chance. If they didn't win here, they wouldn't get another. Alex Carter stood at the heart of the Resistance's last stronghold, his gaze locked on the horizon. The night sky was lit up by the glow of distant explosions, a grim reminder of the battle still raging across the planet. The Empire's final assault had begun, their fleet now in full force. It was no longer just an invasion. It was an all-out war to destroy Earth and everything humanity had fought for. "We can't hold out much longer," Lieutenant Harper said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of their situation. She stood beside Alex, her tired eyes scanning the monitors in front of them, showing live footage of the Empire's advancing forces. "They have us cornered. We're outnumbered, outgunned. It's only a matter of time." Alex didn't look away from the screen. He could feel the weight of her words pressing on him, suffocating him. But there was something else deep inside him, something stronger than fear. It was a fire burning bright, refusing to die out. "We have one last shot," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We disrupt their communications one final time. We hit their command ship and take out their leader. Without their leader, the Empire will lose its strength. We take the fight to them." Harper hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You know this could be it, right? There's no coming back from this." Alex turned to face her, his eyes filled with the same determination that had fueled him since the beginning. "We don't get to quit. Not after everything we've been through. Earth isn't just a planet. It's our home. We protect it or we die trying." Harper didn't argue. She knew the truth of his words. They had all seen the destruction, the lives lost, and they knew there was no future if the Empire won. They had already fought too long, sacrificed too much to turn back now. The rest of the team gathered around, their faces grim but resolute. They were all here for one reason: to make sure Earth wasn't lost to the stars. The mission was simple, or at least it was supposed to be. Infiltrate the Empire's flagship, disable their weapons systems, and take out their leader, Lord Malthar, the ruthless warlord who had orchestrated the invasion. If they could do that, they could end the war. But nothing ever went as planned. As Alex and his team boarded the transport ship, the familiar weight of the situation settled around them like a heavy cloak. The last few days had been a blur, constant fighting, constant loss. This was their chance to end it all, one way or another. But Alex couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in his gut. The plan was risky, too risky, but the Empire had underestimated them from the start. They thought humanity was weak, that they could simply crush them underfoot. They were wrong. "We'll land on the south side," Alex said, his voice calm as he went over the plan one last time. "We move quickly, disable their communications, and breach the command center. Harper, you're with me. The rest of you, secure the lower levels and clear a path to the control room." Everyone nodded, and for a moment the gravity of their mission hung in the air. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for a future that would either be enslaved by the Empire or free, no matter the cost. The ship landed with a violent jolt. The sound of alarms filled the air as the doors opened, and Alex's team stormed out into the chaos. The Empire's forces were everywhere, but this time they weren't waiting. They weren't hiding. They were striking back, fighting with everything they had left. Alex led the charge, his rifle blazing as they cut through the enemy forces. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the ship's halls, and the heat of battle surrounded them like a storm. They were outnumbered, but they were ready. The team moved like a well-oiled machine, each member knowing exactly where they needed to be, each one focused on the mission. They reached the communications room first, and Harper wasted no time in setting the charges. The Empire's communication systems were the heart of their power. If they could destroy them, the Empire would lose their ability to coordinate the attack. It was their only hope of survival. As Harper worked, Alex kept his eyes on the door, his finger tight on the trigger. Every second counted. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, and soon, Empire soldiers appeared, charging toward them. "Covering fire," Alex shouted. He and his team fought back the soldiers as Harper finished planting the charges. The door exploded open, and the command center was theirs. But then a figure emerged from the shadows, Lord Malthar, the leader of the Empire's invasion force. His towering form loomed over them, his eyes filled with cold malice. "You think you can defeat me?" Malthar's voice echoed through the room, low and menacing. "You are nothing. Your resistance means nothing. You will kneel before the Empire." Alex didn't hesitate. He charged forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle was personal now. It wasn't just about Earth. It was about everything the Empire had destroyed. It was about proving that humanity would never bow to anyone. With a fierce cry, Alex slammed into Malthar, their weapons clashing in a burst of light and sound. The alien's strength was overwhelming, but Alex wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for Earth, for the future of his people. Every punch, every strike was driven by the memory of the lives lost, the cities destroyed. He didn't stop, didn't hesitate, and in the end, it was that will, that unbreakable human spirit that won. Malthar collapsed, his body lifeless. The resistance had won. As the flagship began to crumble around them, the team moved quickly, planting explosives to ensure the Empire's hold over Earth was shattered for good. Alex stood amidst the chaos, his breath heavy, his body battered, but the weight of their victory felt like the world lifting off his shoulders. "Let's go," he said, looking at his team. There was no time for celebration. The war wasn't over yet, but Earth had just taken its first real step toward freedom. They made it back to their escape pods, the remnants of the Empire's flagship falling into chaos behind them. Earth had survived another day, but more battles lay ahead. Alex watched as the stars twinkled in the distance. The void of space stretched out before him. The war was far from over, but Earth had fought back. And as long as humanity had the strength to stand, the galaxy would never forget who they were. The war was far from over, but Earth had won a significant victory. The Empire's flagship was destroyed, their leader slain. The Empire, though still strong, had suffered a blow unlike any other. The message was clear. Humanity would not be erased, not without a fight. The days following the victory were tense. The world had been broken, cities burned to the ground, entire countries decimated by the Empire's ruthless assault. But as Earth's survivors gathered together, they found something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Alex Carter stood on the steps of a rebuilt command center, looking out at the crowd of people who had gathered. There were soldiers, civilians, and refugees from all over the world. They had all come together, not just to rebuild their cities, but to rebuild their spirit. Their home was not lost, and they had one man, no, one species, to thank for that: themselves. He looked down at the people who had fought beside him, who had bled and died for a cause greater than any single person. There was no glory in war, only loss, but there was something else too. There was resilience. The people of Earth had been brought to their knees, but now they stood taller than ever before. Alex turned to his team standing behind him. Their faces, worn and tired, still held the fire they had fought with. "We've done something no one thought possible," Alex said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "The Empire thought they could crush us. They thought they could make us their slaves. But today, we proved them wrong." The crowd cheered, the sound rising up like a wave. Alex's chest swelled with pride, but it was tempered with the understanding that their fight wasn't over. The Empire had retreated, but they were far from beaten. Earth would need to stay vigilant. The Empire would regroup. They had the power of fleets, technology, and armies, but humanity had something else. Humanity had resolve. Over the next few weeks, the world began to heal piece by piece. The cities that had been destroyed were slowly being rebuilt, though it would take years before they were whole again. The resistance, now a force to be reckoned with, worked tirelessly, helping civilians, maintaining order, and ensuring that no more Empire forces could find their way to Earth. Alex worked alongside them, but his thoughts were never far from the stars. He knew the Empire was still out there, lurking in the shadows. But the longer Earth held its ground, the more the universe began to notice. News of humanity's victory spread beyond Earth's atmosphere, carried by the very signals that had once been used to command the Empire's fleet. And soon, it wasn't just Earth that was watching. The resistance efforts across other worlds began to rally. The Dominion of Carthun, once a neutral power, now sent aid, offering supplies and intelligence. The peaceful Zalran race, who had been enslaved by the Empire for centuries, sent representatives to Earth, offering their support. It was the beginning of something bigger than anyone had anticipated. Alex had thought their fight was only for Earth, but now it seemed that humanity had become a symbol for something more. They weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were fighting for the freedom of countless others. Alex sat at the command center one night, alone in the quiet. The air was thick with the weight of what was to come. The last battle had been won, but the war was far from over. He knew the Empire wouldn't give up easily. They were a machine, cold and calculating, built for domination. And yet, in all their vastness, in all their power, they had never understood humanity. They had never understood that humans never stop fighting. No matter how many times they are knocked down, they get up. No matter how dark the night, they find the strength to rise again. A soft knock on the door broke his thoughts, and Alex looked up to see Harper standing there, a tired but hopeful look on her face. "Still up, sir?" she asked, her voice gentle. "The council's meeting. They're talking about our next move." Alex stood, rubbing his eyes. "I know, I keep thinking about everything we've lost, and everything we have to fight for." Harper nodded, stepping into the room. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. We've all done more. But it's not just about surviving anymore, Alex. It's about making sure this never happens again." Alex sighed, the weight of her words settling in. He wasn't sure he was ready for that responsibility, but who else was there? The galaxy would be watching Earth now. They had just seen what humans were capable of, and Alex knew they would never be the same again. That night, Alex stood with the representatives of the galaxy's free worlds, looking out at Earth below. They were planning their next move, a joint effort to ensure the Empire's retreat was permanent. The war had not ended, but the fight was no longer one-sided. The galaxy had seen the might of humanity, and now they were ready to stand with Earth. Alex turned to the gathered leaders, the faces of those who had fought beside him, who had come to Earth's aid. "This isn't just our fight anymore," he said, his voice strong. "We've shown the galaxy what humanity can do. Now it's time for us to lead, not just for Earth, but for every world the Empire has oppressed." The room went silent for a moment before one of the Zalran leaders stood, nodding in agreement. "We have watched your kind, Alex Carter, and we have seen what you are capable of. Your courage, your will, it is the spark the galaxy needs." The others stood as well, their voices rising in agreement. For the first time in centuries, a light began to shine in the galaxy. The Empire had been strong, but its control was broken. And humanity, once thought weak, had become the symbol of a new era, one where the oppressed could rise and fight for their freedom, no matter the odds. Alex stood tall, the weight of the moment settling in. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was the face of a revolution, a symbol of what humanity could do when it refused to surrender. And in that moment, he understood. Earth had always been small, isolated, and ignored. But now, Earth was the heartbeat of something bigger than anyone could have ever imagined. The war had not yet ended, but Earth's victory had changed the course of history. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what the humans would do next. And Alex Carter, once an ordinary soldier, had become a beacon of hope for all who had been oppressed. No one knew what the future held, but one thing was clear: humanity would never be enslaved again. The stars had never looked brighter. After the darkest days of war, after the endless struggles and sacrifices, Earth was finally at peace, or at least a kind of peace. The battle for survival had been won, but the galaxy was not yet healed. Humanity had shown the universe what it was capable of, but now the real work began. Alex Carter stood at the center of the newly constructed Galactic Council. Earth was no longer a backwater planet, hidden in a forgotten corner of the universe. It was now a beacon of defiance, hope, and strength. And in that room, with representatives from countless worlds, Alex felt the weight of what Earth had become. The council chamber was filled with leaders of free worlds, gathered to discuss what the future would look like after the fall of the Empire. The walls were adorned with banners of the planets that had joined forces with humanity. They had watched the resistance rise, had witnessed humanity fight back when all seemed lost. And now, they were ready to stand together. Earth was no longer just a world. It was the heart of the rebellion, the spark that had ignited a fire across the galaxy. The oppression that had lasted for centuries was starting to crumble. The Empire, once the ruler of everything, was in disarray. Its forces had scattered, Its fleet was broken. Its leader was dead. Alex's mind raced as he looked around the room at the representatives of each planet. Every species, once kept in chains or fear by the Empire, now had a voice at this table. For the first time, Earth's voice would be heard. "We've done something that no one thought possible," Alex began, his voice carrying across the room. "We've beaten the Empire, but now we have to ask ourselves, what do we do with this victory? The Empire may have fallen, but it's still out there in pieces. We have to rebuild, not just Earth but the galaxy, and we have to do it together." There was a quiet murmur in the room, the weight of his words sinking in. Alex had become more than a symbol of Earth's resistance. He had become the face of a new order, one where strength wasn't about power or technology. It was about standing together against all odds. The days after the fall of the Empire were filled with uncertainty. The galaxy had been thrown into chaos. Planets that had once lived in fear now had the chance to stand on their own, but many were unsure how to move forward. Alex and the Earth-based Council worked day and night to bring stability to the galaxy. One by one, the representatives began to speak, their voices filled with emotion as they remembered the battles they had fought, the lives they had lost. But there was no longer hatred in their eyes. There was hope, and that was something new. "The victory of Earth is our victory," the Zalran leader said, his voice calm but firm. "We owe this to the strength of humanity. The galaxy will never be the same. You've shown us that." "We're not done yet," Alex replied, his eyes burning with determination. "The galaxy is in pieces, and it's up to all of us to put it back together. Earth will lead, but we will not do this alone." There was silence in the room, but it wasn't filled with doubt. It was filled with agreement. They knew what had to be done. Earth had risen against the Empire, but now they would rise to lead the galaxy into a new age. The rebuilding of Earth had already begun, but it was clear it would take time. The land was scarred, and many cities had been reduced to rubble. But humanity wasn't used to giving up. They rebuilt not just their homes, but their spirit. Alex walked through the streets of New York, now a center for the new Earth government. The buildings were still being reconstructed, but the streets were alive again. People were working, talking, rebuilding what had been lost. There was a sense of purpose in the air. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were creating something new. He passed by a group of children playing, their laughter filling the air. He paused for a moment, watching them. They had never known a world without fear, without the shadow of the Empire hanging over them. But they would. They would grow up in a world where they had the freedom to choose their future. "Captain," Harper's voice called from behind him. He turned to see her approaching, a smile on her face, though her eyes were tired. "You look tired," Alex said with a slight chuckle. She smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes fully. "We all are, but this is worth it." Alex nodded, his gaze returning to the children. "It's worth everything." Harper followed his gaze, her expression softening. "We've made a difference, Alex. I don't think anyone thought we could do it, but we did." "We did," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's just the beginning." In the days that followed, Alex found himself meeting with more leaders, working to forge new alliances, ensuring that the freedom they had won would not be lost again. The galaxy was changing, slowly but surely. The Empire had ruled with fear for centuries, but the worlds now had something more powerful: unity. The galaxy was no longer a collection of separate, frightened worlds. It was a community, united by the struggle to reclaim freedom, united by the human spirit that had sparked it all. Alex stood in front of the council once more, but this time it wasn't to speak of war. It was to speak of peace, of a future built together, not in the ashes of battle, but in the hopes of a new beginning. "We've shown the galaxy who we are," Alex said, his voice steady. "We've proven that even the smallest spark can start a fire that changes everything. Now, let's build something worth fighting for, not just for Earth, but for every world that still dreams of freedom." As the applause filled the room, Alex's heart swelled with pride. This was the moment they had fought for, the moment when Earth would stand tall, not as a broken world, but as the leader of a new age. And in that moment, he knew one thing for sure: humanity's legacy would live on forever.